solar flare that took down telegraph lines all over the world. If something that big hit today, it could take down our electrical grid, communications, everything.
That happened in Canada 10 or 15 years ago.
Right, a smaller one in
Power was
Canada.
off for
Yeah.
a couple of days, I think.
And obviously, the further north you get, the more susceptible it is. So, if you can imagine, I mean, some of us went without power for 4 days during the windstorm. If you can imagine going weeks, months, and even years, they said if it's bad enough, it could be years before they get power restored.
Do you actually know what it does? I mean, I know it shuts the power down, but I don't know what it actually
It's a electrical magnetic pulse that comes out and it overloads the power lines in electronics.
So were you just talking about switching fuses?
No.
No, it melts.
It melts.
Fries everything.
It fries everything. It fries the lines, it fries the switches, it fries the transformers. It
The
goes
other
down.
thing it does for ham radio is that even just a mild solar flare like we've had, it provides enough static that it's very difficult to make communications work.
Does it destroy a ham radio?
No,
Why not? I mean, that's not my...
I mean that, I'm just saying if you're getting rotten reception. But if
Well, I know
it's a major one, yeah.
I'm just trying to decide, to figure out how it works. Why would it not fry the ham radio?
Oh, it will.
No, it will.
If
I was just
any-
talking about like.
any electronic
you just had
item.
now, communications
Is
would
it
be
have to be
hard.
on?
Any electronic
No.
item that has a
No,
power
it's-
supply, a battery, anything like that, if that's hooked up and it has power to it, it can fry it, depending on how bad. So,
You can
if,
have spare
I'm not
parts
trying
and
to-
they'll be fine.
not trying to scare anybody or anything, but if a foreign country, they could set off some nukes in the atmosphere above the U.S. and it could take out, create the same thing in EMP pulse. So, you need to be prepared for long term, and that's where the knowledge comes in. And that's kind of the stuff that we're addressing today.
Spare parts. Then you can reassemble them and they won't be
So
fried.
besides that, what are some other long-term things that we have to prepare for?
Battery.
Oh, we need water, but what other things? We have the solar flare. What else might we have to be prepared for? Earthquake? Anything else?
Drought.
Drought?
Terrorism.
Terrorism?
Kaysville water filter goes crappy.
I thought it was. No, I'm kidding.
It is. Normally crappy.
Okay, and there's a storm. We could have a worse storm than we had here. It could be in the winter, it could be a winter storm. And we would have to know how to be prepared to survive in our home. Okay, with all that said, I'm going to turn the time over to Kevin Collier on the water filter. Kevin?
On that EMP thing, you can cover your whole house in tin foil.
And wear a little cone of aluminum.
Fix your brain,
And then recycle the tinfoil into a boat. Are you serious? Hey, right.
Okay, you can go about 40 days without food. You can only go about 40 hours without water. Water is really important. Drinking water, every person needs about a half a gallon a day to survive, but it's nice to have some clean wash water. What we're going to talk about today is what we call the slow sand filter.
Are there more handouts?
They're coming.
They're coming around. There should be enough. Everybody get one?
Oh, they're coming. They're coming.
We're actually pretty fortunate. We don't live in the middle of the desert. We do have water around here. Where are some of the water sources close to us?
Underground.
Where?
Ground.
Ground? Yeah. How far down?
At my house, not very far.
I was gonna say, you go to where all the sump
Yeah,
pumps
but-
are.
Most places in our neighborhoods and everything, if you go down 10 to 15 feet, you'll hit water.
Yeah, but isn't that toxic?
No.
Really? After all the years people have been changing oil in their backyard and just letting it drain in the ground?
No. Mother Nature is very good at filtering water. But there's Bear Creek. Does everybody know creek runs. It's right over behind those houses over there. It'll be a walk. If you got a wheelbarrow or a four-wheeler or something, go get some water there. There's some springs in the back of President Barlow's house. There's a constant flow of water there.
What about Giardia? I understand that most of the water in Utah has Giardia.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
I just want to figure out where the water sources are. I think there's enough water around here to supply all our needs, so we're going to talk about how do you make the water safe. Okay, let's talk about what can be in the water. Giardia, E. coli, Cryptosporidium.
You want to explain what some of those are, because some of those are just
They're-
foreign words.
They're little creatures. They're little parasites that can get in your gut and they can make you very sick. Let's talk about fecal coliform for a second. People misunderstand that. They think that fecal coliform comes from feces. If you look at the whole range of bacteria, there's most of the bacteria dies at about 110, at about 100 and, well, anyway, 160.
Yeah, it's about 160, because that's what you gotta cook meat to.
Anyway, there's some bacteria, bad bacteria, that just your body temperature will kill. But bacteria that will grow at 98.6 or above is called fecal coliform. But not much bacteria can survive above 160. But here's the really fun thing is all that stuff we just talked about. Oh, there can also be dissolved pollutants in the water. There's dissolved organics. These are oil type products: benzene, ethylene, toluene, methanol. These kind of things can be in the water. There's also toxic metals: lead, zinc, mercury, cadmium, and a few of those. But there's a very simple way to deal with that and have safe water. The oldest known slow sand filter was done by the Egyptians. The Nile River was very dirty, very muddy. They would make terracotta pots, and they'd fill them up with sand from the sand dunes, and they'd pour their water in the top and just let it trickle through very slowly, and it would come out very clean and it tasted good. So it goes back almost 5,000 years. But I do water treatment for work, and I deal with really nasty industrial wastewaters and stuff. But I went on the internet and I looked at different slow sand filters, and I found one that I really liked, and then I modified it just a little tiny bit. But on the diagram here, I have a 55-gallon drum, just a poly drum. And we start out by putting a PVC pipe through the sidewall. You can go to Dirk's Plumbing, and you can get this little fitting, and you drill a hole in the side of the drum, and then you can screw a pipe on the outside, and you can screw a PVC pipe on the inside. If you have any questions about the plumbing, give me a call, or Alan Auger, or Kib, or somebody. But anyway, so you just have this pipe that goes down the sidewall, and then it lays on the bottom. And in the bottom, you can just take a hacksaw and cut little slots in the bottom and put a cap on the end. And once you get that in place, now you want this pipe down about 6 inches from the top of the barrel, and I'll explain why in a minute. But well, we'll talk about how we build it, and then I'll tell you how it takes out all those different things out of the water. So then you want to cover your pipe with just some pea gravel, but you want to wash your pea gravel because you're going to be drinking the water that's flowing around the pea gravel. Everybody's seen pea gravel, but you can pass that around. About a 3-inch layer. And then what I like to use is this pet screen. It's a polyurethane pet screen. You can pass that around, and I put that over the pea gravel, and that's to hold back the sand. I also,
Where did you get the pet screen at?
Home Depot. Yeah, they
Is
sell
that what
it
it's called?
in a roll.
Is it called pet screen?
It's called pet screen because dogs and cats can't destroy it. It's really, really durable.
So now the weed block stuff wouldn't work, right? Because
The what?
the weed block stuff you roll out and block weeds from growing.
Anything that'll hold the sand back that the water will flow through will work fine. I've also used just pink fiberglass insulation. Some people don't like to use that. They think they can get little fibers in your thing, but some people say fiber in your diet's good. But I never could see any in the water, and that worked really good to hold the sand back. So you got pea gravel, then the pet screen, then a layer of sand, and then you can put in some activated carbon. And you can buy it on the internet. There's all different kinds. There's coconut husk. Any kind of wood that's cooked without oxygen turns into activated carbon. And I put about a 1-inch layer of that in.
Are we talking about charcoal?
There's a difference between charcoal and activated carbon. And I'm not a chemist or whatever, I can't really explain it, but it needs to say activated carbon.
Kevin,
Yes.
would that be cheaper if we ordered it bulk?
Yeah, I bought a 25-pound bag, and it made dozens of filters. So you could get with your neighbors or whatever and buy a 25-pound bag. I had brought one home, and we did 4 or 5 filters in the neighborhood over in the 13th ward.
Where'd you get it?
What's that?
Where did you get the charcoal at?
It's activated carbon. You can buy it in small quantities at places that have fish tanks, but I just say order it on the internet. There's places in Salt Lake that have it. I ordered some over the internet. I just bought a 25-pound bag, and it went a long ways. Now the sand that goes below the carbon and above the carbon, you want to use unclassified sand. You don't want to use sand that's been classified in a screen. You want to use this sand that Home Depot calls it play sand. But it's got the really, really fine sand in it. It's been washed, but it's got really, really fine sand in it. I'll pass that around.
Could you use silica?
It's silica sand. It's just like from Parsons or whatever up there.
Well, I just mean, no, silica is finer. Silica is what we use in sand filters.
Yeah. That's got quartzite and silica and
So unclassified sand?
unclassified. Classified means they've screened it and took all the tiny stuff out. Plaster sand has been, all the fine stuff is out. It's pretty fine, but they've taken the really fine stuff out. So you get this all in there, and now what you do is you can put water in here, and the first time you use this, it can take half a day for that water. There's air in the sand that's wanting to come up, and the water's trying to go down. It can take a half a day or so to get it wet. Don't get discouraged. It just takes a long time. You have to keep adding water, but you have to get the whole thing wet. And the reason it's called a slow sand filter is because we've only got a 6-inch differential between the top of the water here and the position of the outlet. So it just very slowly goes down through that whole filter, finds the pipe at the bottom with the slots, and then comes out and comes out the spigot.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How does it come out the spigot?
Gravity. Your water level's up here, and your spigot's down here. So this gravity, it'll just slowly come down. And once it comes down 6 inches, it'll stop. And then you got to add more water to get more water to go through it.
So then it comes out and you store it in something?
We'll talk about what you do with the water after it comes out. So that unclassified sand that's got all the really, really fine stuff in, when it gets wet, it compacts even more. And the way this is set up with such a slow velocity through there, bacteria cannot pass through this sand. This will strain out all bacteria. Now when you first start your filter up, it'll be a little bit dirty. There'll be a little bit of really super fine sand and that coming out. So for like the first day or so, you just keep recycling the water. whatever comes out, you just dump it back in the top and you just recycle it. They have to do this with commercial filters, and they have to do it at the water treatment plant. Every time they back flush the filters, they have to flow through there and recycle that water till it gets clean, and then you can start using it. If you haven't used your filter for a year or 2 years or 5 years or whatever, that's fine. You just start putting water through it, just start recycling that water until it gets clean. And you can just hold it up to the light in a clear. I use those little plastic party cups, or even just a water bottle. And just keep filtering it until it just gets really super clear and really super clean. And that will filter the bacteria out. Now the carbon layer will absorb volatile organic compounds, all those toluene, methane, and it'll also absorb the heavy metals. Carbon will also absorb chlorine. A lot of people in your houses right now have a little filter that's got activated carbon in it, and it knocks out most of the chlorine before you drink it.
What about the chloride?
The what?
Will it take out fluoride?
It could. The activated carbon could absorb a little bit of the fluoride. There's such a little bit in there already, but now, so you get your filter set up, you get it wetted, you recycle your water through it, and you get it running clean. I mean, if we had a really bad emergency, I mean, we had like a Richter 8 earthquake, and we got houses down and busted pipes and everything, you could have your filter up and going in a day. Just recycle a bunch of water through there till it's coming out clean. Now you take the water that comes out of your filter, and I apologize, I couldn't find my jar, which is terrible preparedness. But you go to Walmart, for $14, you can buy a jar about this big around, about that tall, of swimming pool chlorine. And you don't want to use Clorox. Clorox has other stuff in it that's not good for you. But the hot tub or swimming pool chlorine.
You know, we've been looking, I don't remember how many of you remember Tim Wolf when he came here and did his.
I do. I have a whole notebook full of
It
notes.
says, he points out, it says this little bottle right here will do 50,000 gallons.
That's where I got it.
I have never found just chlorine.
I found it on the shelf at Walmart.
So, well,
Is
Hey.
it the swimming pool stuff? Because it says it has all the warning stuff on there. I'm scared to ask.
are we talking bromine? Are they different? Does it just say chlorine?
It's a powder, and it just it's a tall jar, about a foot tall, and it's about 4 inches in diameter.
But does it just say, the next thing is I find chlorine with this and this and this. Chlorine, this, and I'm.
Well, I just know it's what they use for hot tubs and swimming pools. I don't.
We just,
You can also go to Walmart and they have the RV chlorine stuff additive, it's not as concentrated.
I just
But
don't
you
want to
can
make
use
sure,
that.
I want to make sure I'm not getting something that's going to kill me.
Yeah, this stuff is specifically made for when you go camping, you add water to your trailer and you pour it directly into it. So if you're concerned about that, that's one way that, you can get that and look at the ratios on the bottle. And it'll tell
yeah,
you
we just
specifically.
wanted to make sure we were getting the right thing because it sounded pretty toxic.
Yeah, if
and
you're
I
concerned, go
wasn't
that way,
sure.
it'll be
Yeah, so
slightly more expensive.
So the thing you got to be careful about is to get the dosage right. And so the best thing to do is to take a little bit of that powdered chlorine and put it like in 5 gallons of water. And then you just take a few drops of that and put it in your drinking water. But you can follow the formula on there.
Emergency Essentials had a little packet, and I bought 2 of them, and they said, how much water do you want to store? And they were talking about just storing water,
Yeah.
and they gave me just exactly the right amount. You just pour in that much, half into one barrel and half into another barrel for 100 gallons.
So you can, 50,000 gallons would probably do a family of 6 for a year. And it's 1 jar and it's $14. I think the Sportsman's Warehouse has some I saw on the shelf. But anyway, what the chlorine does is it wipes out anything that may have, gotten through the filter or whatever, but it's a preservative. It'll keep your water clean.
Keep the algae down.
For months. Okay, I'm glad you brought up the algae thing. Now, my filter's sitting out behind my shed, right where the water runs off my shed. And I let the rainwater, every time it rains, goes into my filter, and I have the valve open, and every time it rains, I get water going through my filter. But so my filter, it's been there for 3 years, and it's got water in it. And I've got some algae, and I've got some moss, and some stuff growing in the top. That's a very good thing. That's what Mother Nature does. That's what a swamp does, and the mountains do, and the lawn does. And those aquatic plants, and you may even have some aquatic life in there. It'll eat the nitrates and the sulfides and other stuff that are in the water. It'll even make your water taste better, but it's not to be of a concern.
Just looks bad to drink.
But if you've had water sitting in there and you haven't had any water through it for a long time, that's why you want to run a bunch of water through there. I keep a cover on mine and just a brick sitting on top of it, and keeps the mosquitoes from growing in there. Anyway, now I was talking to Jeff, and some people may not want to do a 55-gallon drum one. Now, a 55-gallon drum, if you actually gave somebody the assignment to sit there and run water through that all day, will do 500 gallons a day. That's a lot of water. So you could, one per neighborhood or something, would supply people with water, and everybody could take a turn. They could go haul the water over it. They can run it through their filter. But if you wanted to have a smaller one, I had Caleb help me this week, and we had some pipe down at work. And this is a piece of 6-inch Schedule 40 pipe. We bought it over at Standard Plumbing. That's over where Ultimate Electronics used to be. And you can buy a cap for that. You can just glue that cap on, turn it upside down, and then just do your PVC thing inside, just like you do on here, and you could make a smaller one. The nice thing about the 55-gallon drum one is you can dump 5 gallons of water in the top, and then put your clean bucket under the spigot, and you can come back 20 minutes later and you got 5 gallons of clean water. This one would do maybe about a quart or a half a gallon in the same amount of time, but it'll work just the same.
Kevin?
Yes.
What about that? How many times do you have to, when you're starting this, tell me again how many times you have to recycle the water through?
Just till you hold it up and it's crystal
And it's
clear.
clean? And then how long, is there a point when this 55-gallon drum has to be changed out and you have to rebuild, or?
If you were putting really muddy, dirty water in here, you might have to skim off the top of the sand once in a while. But
And replace it?
If it gets too low. But this is flowing it's flowing so slow that it'll blind right on the very top. All the stuff you're trying to take out of the water will be right on the very top of the sand. And you can just scrape off a quarter of an inch. You're good to go again.
What about in the wintertime, freezing?
I've thought about that, and in the wintertime, the place for this would be in your basement, probably.
It's not very mobile, though.
This guy could be.
Because how much does this barrel weigh when you're all done?
About 500 pounds. I moved mine around with a hand truck.
You just have to get your 800.
I actually took it up to the church once, and I decided I'd never do that again. Yes.
I apologize if you already addressed this, but how often do you need to change out the activated carbon, ever?
It would, for what's in our water around here. I mean, you're not trying to convert industrial wastewater. When you're using stream water or groundwater, it'll last for 10 or 20 years.
That's good for me.
You're looking at a lot of that stuff. It's parts per billion in the water. Maybe at most a couple of parts per million. Do you get into the analysis of the water in the reservoirs, or just how much is there?
Who, me? My staff does.
They do the samples and all
Yeah,
that.
they do all the sampling.
We have really clean water here.
Could you activate it using Weber water, for instance, just to test it out?
Sure.
Could probably even use Hayes Creek.
Secondary water would be wonderful through this filter. Hey, this is more sophisticated than the water plant up by Hill Air Force Base that does our drinking water. They don't go through activated carbon.
Yes, they do.
Do they?
Yep.
Okay. I know the big sand filters don't have a layer in it, so it must be separate filters.
They have activated carbon.
Do they?
They have also gone to UV and ozone up here.
Glenn brings up a good point. Chlorine in our water supply has actually been outlawed. And I forget what the date is, it's 2016 or something, that all the municipalities have to find something to use instead of chlorine. When chlorine kills the bacteria and organic matter, the organic matter decays into a trihalomethide, which is carcinogenic. I read a report that said over 500 cities in the U.S. have switched to chlorine dioxide.
We've been using magnesium chloride. Because if you,
Can
they
you
used to
speak up,
leave-
Glenn?
We switched to magnesium chloride because on 9/11 they had to go up with rifles and machine guns and protect the water supplies all over the country. Because they didn't want the chlorine gas, which is heavier in air, to come down to the homes area and kill people. So they mix this as they go. Okay, the plant here in Layton switched to ozone, which is very good. It gets rid of the crypto and everything else. The plant up in Bountiful uses UV light, and we could do UV light filters as pretty easy.
I bought a little device called SteriPen. You put two batteries in it and take a glass of water from a creek or something and switch this thing on. You just stir this ultraviolet light in it for 30 seconds and then it buzzes and your water's sterile. Anyway, when I said that at the city or the water treatment plants, the great big multi-layered media beds don't have carbon in it, that would be something. A separate tank or something.
They still run activated charcoal.
We're so fortunate to live where we do and have a clean, safe water supply. Caleb went on his mission to Oaxaca, Mexico, and he was in the hospital all the time, parasites, dehydrated. It was a real pain. Anything else? Any other questions?
I have all sorts of questions. So the purpose of this is if our water supply is compromised, right? So we're going to be putting dirty water in it in the event of an emergency. So in that case, would we need to change the carbon?
No, for the water that's groundwater, stream water and stuff around here, that carbon will last for
Forever?
a long, long time.
Can you put too much carbon in it?
No?
Does it matter if you store it dry or wet? I mean, if it was.
No, you could build this sand filter and just leave it dry and just fire it up when you have an emergency.
So when you talk 55-gallon barrel plastic, you talking those ones there?
Just like that.
And you just cut the top off?
I take a Sawzall and just cut the ends of the top out inside here.
Hey, do they make those so they blend in with your yard a little bit?
To paint your house.
Actually, they do.
I can show you how to use them. Spray paint.
Just make a camo skirt for it.
Yeah, build a skirt for
The
it.
problem with it, if it's in your yard, is the winter time. If you have water in it, it's going to freeze and break.
Does it blow away in east winds?
Not 500 pounds. If it does, we got more problems.
So in the winter, if it's wet and it freezes, will it break?
No.
Okay.
Well, I guess the sand will allow
You just don't fill it right.
expansion.
If it's just straight water, it can break.
Actually, leave this valve open, that can break.
Yeah,
If you leave that valve open, the ice can expand it, it won't break it.
What about, are there, you know, like you have those little backpacking filters, are there any commercially available big filters that you can just buy that are
Sure,
smaller?
I'm glad you brought that up. So, you know, Chip and I have dug holes in the cattails, pumped our water with the Scout. So there's all kinds of, you know, pure PUR. They make a filter called the Scout filter. There's literally dozens of those. You can change the elements in them. If the water's really dirty, I run it through paper towels or a coffee filter before I put it through the little hand pump filter. But those are perfectly fine, but they're a lot of work. I mean, just to get a couple of gallons of water.
I know you researched to find any big ones that supply a whole house.
They do. You can buy some bigger ones. I saw one that you could actuate with your foot.
You know, at Desert Book, that for missionaries, they have the little ones that they have bought for missionaries so that they can go out.
They even have water drinking bottles that just have the little filter right in the cap that sticks down in the bottle.
Kevin, what is the price for some household filter that you said you work with your foot pump?
The foot pump one,
The cost, yeah, what is it?
it was like $100. It wasn't bad. The little Scout ones are around $15, something like that. John?
Now, these blue barrels, they do come in smaller sizes. I think there's one 30 gallons.
Yeah, what you want to be careful there though is you need the depth of the bed there. So I think a 30 would probably be okay. But the more bed depth you've got, the better.
Okay, why do we need to cut the top off? I'm not quite getting
It's
this.
so much easier to get, well,
That's
to
pretty
get the pipe in and the screen and the pea gravel.
Oh, it's a solid top, right? These are solid.
It's solid.
You can buy some that have the lids come off.
Yeah, they're more expensive, but you can buy an open top one, but they're more expensive.
We do
If cutting the open in the top is a problem, just give me a call and we'll help you get the top cut open.
So I like the idea of putting it under the drip line of the roof, but how does the water get in if it's got a lid on it?
I have a piece of 1/8" plexiglass sitting on the top of mine, and with a brick on it, and I got some holes drilled in it.
And that keeps the mosquitoes out?
Keeps the birds out of it.
So have you heard of mosquito, do you know what mosquito dunk is?
Mosquito dunk?
It's like a little round thing that you like can put in a horse water trough and it kills the mosquito larvae. I was wondering how that would,
That would worry me.
it would worry you?
Any kind of an insecticide, I wouldn't want to have in my water filter.
Okay, so would it filter
The
it
things
out?
that they bring around and drop in your ponds and stuff is an Israeli bacteria, and it's known to, and been tested to only deal with
Is that what
mosquitoes and biting flies, and that's probably like the mosquito dunk. We've used that for several years. Randy Hatch puts that in all the places around.
So could you put that in your water filter?
You could put that in there.
I think my recommendation would be to build a small one or one of these and leave it dry until you need it. I'm just always messing around with, so.
What did you call that pipe again?
Schedule 40.
Schedule 40. PVC water pipe.
It's not cheap.
It's not too bad.
You need to, like, we have a bunch of these blue barrels of water, would I need to run that water through it? I wouldn't, really,
No.
because it's clean.
Yeah.
You just need
If
to
you're
add
just
it.
storing water in barrels, I know some people that change it out every conference. That's how they remind
Are you
themselves.
kidding?
Just gonna talk about that.
That's a little overkill though, isn't it? I thought it was like a year.
No, actually, about every 6 to 12 months, you need to change that water out. The chlorine will dissipate.
It depends on a couple of factors, and I'll cover that when we go through
If it's in a cool, dark place, it'd probably be good for years. If it's in your warm garage or outside, you want to replace it. I always kept mine outside, and I just undo the bung and stick the garden hose in there and just let it overflow for an hour and screw the lid back on. You don't need to, if you do it every 6 months, you don't need to add any preservative to it at all. It's got enough in it.
So a household like a Brita filter will not do the job for under.
Well, like,
We use a Brita filter mostly for taste, I guess.
you can, all the filters that you buy, you can read and it'll tell you what it will take out. You know, this might seem a little extreme or whatever, but you'd be perfectly fine taking the water that's running down the gutter from somebody's sprinklers overflowing or a rainstorm and run it through this filter. This is where, you know, the pipes are all busted and we need a lot of water and we're going to need it for a long time. Kate?
You give me the 6 inches and 3 inches and all that. It's dark down there. How do I know that it's 6 inches? What's the key to when you're pouring it in? Do you know that you've made 6 inches?
Mark it.
Oh, just put in enough that it just starts to come out the faucet.
No. You're saying
Sand
the
layers.
pea gravel is 6 inches and then the charcoal is, what, 3 inches?
Take a measuring tape and mark it with a Sharpie marker, your layers on the inside.
Inside of it.
And it's not critical.
Okay.
It's not critical.
So if it's 5 1/2 or 5 3/4, I won't die.
Or 7.
Or 7.
John?
Hey, if base was a concern or how it looks, part of this area.
Yes, I thought about that. You could dig a hole and this thing could just be sticking up a foot.
Kind of like a trap.
But then you can only get a glass underneath it instead of a bucket. But you're right.
Kevin?
Yeah.
They suggest when you have a 50-gallon drum and you store water in it, you need wood underneath it or something to hold it off cement. Because you'll pull the cement or something from the cement up into the barrel.
Yeah, the chemicals
Is
from
that
the
the
cement
same
leach
with-
through the barrels.
Same
So
thing with this?
you want to put wood
Yeah,
on it.
that's what I've heard.
The filter's not going to matter much because you're not, well, unless you store water in it. If it's dry, it's not going
Well,
to matter.
that's my question. Do we need this on the
But if
top
you
of
start
wood?
putting water in it, you want to keep it off. Yeah, and if you put it on wood and you need to move it, get a hand truck under it. It's a lot easier if it's up on wood.
That's good to know, thank you. Yeah, I do water for work, so I thought I'd have one at my house, and if we had a really bad emergency, I'd just invite everybody to bring their water over there. Because actually, there's a formula for this, and it's 150 gallons per day per square foot. It is what they call the flux rate. That's slow enough to stop all the bacteria. So, yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate to be involved in the Boy Scouts, and I've got a Catadine and a Pure Scout and just stuff laying all over the place. But I saw this about 5 years ago, and I thought, you dump your bucket of water in, you put your clean bucket on, you go back to work, you come back, you got really all the clean water that you want.
Where are you buying your replacement filters for your Scout, Explorer and stuff?
I usually wait till the night before a camp out and do
Sportsman. Mine hasn't been used since we were up there in
Show?
Show.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, they can get pretty ugly in there. Yeah, I go use it and it sits in my garage for a year and then I clean it out the night before.
You gotta be careful about cheap filters because somebody brought us one. And he put it on up there at Shoshone and we were using lake water. and go through and you see all the floaties in there, because it didn't filter much out. So we used that as a pre-filter and then ran it through the Explorer, and after that it worked pretty good.
If you're using an old filter, I worked for a guy that his job was testing filters. And he's pointing out almost every company that was making them, pure, all of them, got sued because they did not filter what they were saying. And a lot of these filters come out, had activated charcoal, and that was it. They had the straws, and he says they do not work.
The one you talked about, or Jeff talked about, was it's like a squeeze bottle, a sports bottle. The church sells those in the distribution center. We took, it's about $15. We took one of those when we went on our trip through Mexico and Guatemala and all those. Didn't have a problem. So those work. John? Hey, that Darrow-Penn that you're talking about, they have a built-in, well, there is a model of that has a built-in battery. You can charge it on a solar panel. And it's pretty neat. I've got one, I've never used it, but it won't clean all water, though. It would have to be specifically clean.
Well, yeah, if you read the instructions, it says to filter your water first. Through like a coffee filter or something like that. You need to get it clear, and then that kills the bacteria.
There's a difference between a filter and a purifier too. You can get stuff, my river running stuff, it's got, where you can filter it, but it's not purified. It's not for drinking.
Have you seen the filters that civil defense sells? They're about this long and this wide, they're wide. You filter it, it takes all the big stuff out and you can put it through. It's not a purifier, it's just a filter.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any more questions for Kevin on the filter itself?
I have a question. So can you put in like your sink water or your used bath water? Can you put anything in there?
You don't want to use water that's got dissolved soaps, and the filter will not. Well, actually, the carbon would take out soap from bath water, but if you're putting a teaspoon of soap through here, then you used up a couple of teaspoons of your activated carbon, and it's going to go pretty quick.
So you gotta take your bath without soap and then you can use it.
You can flush your toilet with your bath water.
Use that water
That's a good idea.
Yeah, use it as gray
What was
water.
that kind of bath? We were a fun trek. Possibles.
Yeah, the possible.
Kid.
They take a wet wash rag and
Explain
clean
to them
everything
how they
that's
do it
possible.
there.
Now, we do have a way to filter out for the bathwater stuff, and we'll get to that in a minute. Anything else? All right, let's take changing out the waters. It's kind of difficult when you get them full. You either have to pump the water out, or else you have to tip them over. Well, I got thinking about it, and I looked online and I found some different ways to do it. And so this is what I've come up with. If you take and change the fittings here, go hose over to the next barrel. It takes and makes a connection that if there's an earthquake and these are shaking, you're not going to break it. Don't use the PVC going directly to the barrel, it'll break them. So if you use the hose, the earthquake won't break the connection here. Now on the input side, I have the fitting here and a pipe that goes all the way bottom. This is just like in your water heater. And so this will stick in here and go down, and the water will come in and stir the water up and push it over to the next barrel. And then it'll push it out the exit. So this side, I would hook up to my faucet, not my irrigation water, the household water, into the barrel. I'd turn it on, and after a while it would clean out the barrels. The water would just push through and clear out. If it's in your house, you want to make sure your connections don't leak. And it can be a little bit difficult when using the hoses. But it's a lot easier to clean it out. The one thing you have to watch for is don't crank your household water up. These barrels aren't built for pressure, and they expand if you put too much pressure on them. So I get it flowing and then turn it down a little bit until I have a little bit coming out the end. So you only want to do 2, maybe 3 barrels at a time, but it's an easy way to cycle your water So you're not having to drain them and do all that. So we'll take it up, we'll hook it up, we'll run the end thing to our jacuzzi or whatever and fill that up, or we'll run it out, water the yard, garden, whatever with it. Just low and slow to push the water through. So that's something I come up with.
For how long do you do that?
You know, every 6 months or a year.
Would you start it and let it run for how long?
Oh,
Yeah.
just for a couple hours, just to make sure it flushes the barrels.
Okay.
But we talked about in the water, how long you should keep it. If you have good, clean water, a completely clean container, a sealed container, you can keep water for years. But if you don't, then you want to cycle through it. You can add additives to it, the chlorine and that. Don't use the bleach. Again, we talked about that. There's other chemicals in that, especially the ones that are scented and all that stuff. I prefer to use the stuff like Kevin was talking about for your jacuzzi, or also at Walmart you can get the ones for your RV, and that's already mixed, it's liquid, and you can go off it tells you on how much to put it in. So, but anyway, that's a quick, easy way to change out the water in your barrels. Any questions on this? Okay. Now, talk about expectations on the fridge. It's an electricity-free fridge. It's not going to be like your fridge that you have in your house, that you can set it to 40 degrees or 35 or whatever, and it keeps it at that. However, this does cool 10 to 20 degrees, and I've heard somebody claim 40 degrees from the outside temperature. So this is what it is. It's a terracotta pot. Inside of a terracotta pot. And just to show you, I set out some lettuce earlier this week on Monday, and this is kind of rotten. I don't think I'd want to eat it. It's browning, it's kind of soft. And I put one in the fridge. It's still crispy. You can hear it. So it does keep it cooler. And see where we're at. We're showing here, now this has been sitting kind of in the sun. I usually keep it in the shade. It's 68 degrees out here in the shade. It's 60 degrees in here. And I've had that, like I said, 20 degrees difference. Is how this works is you put water, the sand in here, and you pour water in here, and the evaporation is what cools it. So you want this where airflow can get around it. If there's a breeze, it cools better. But it does work. And how you make it is I got all these terracotta pots come with a hole in it.
Come with what?
A hole in the bottom. And that's not a good thing. So I took and got a cork. You can get them at the hobby store or wherever. Put it in the bottom. Push it through until it's tight. Then take the saw and cut it off so it's flush. Save this end because we'll need it. And you take and dump sand in it.
It looks like play sand.
What's that?
That's just play sand, right?
It's just play sand.
Does it matter what kind of sand it is?
You know, it really doesn't matter because you're wanting evaporation. So it can be any type of sand you can get your hand on, really.
So one helpful tip to get cheap sand, at the stone places like American Stone up in Sunset, you can get a 5-gallon bucket of the sand for $1.50. So, but this play sand at Home Depot is very expensive.
Yeah. I just grabbed it there because a demonstration that I wasn't going for big quantity. what you want to do is you want to fill this up until the center pot can sit in there. Oh, that's just right. So it's just barely slightly over the edge of this. And then you want to take the leftover pork and put it in the bottom of this one. And this is just to keep your sand from coming up in, or your water. Set that in there. And then you want to take and fill in between the two of these with sand, just like that. I'm not going to bore you with going through it all. Until you get it full like this. And then you just add the water and keep it moist, and the evaporation is what's going to cool it. Now, they say that you can keep a damp towel over it instead of having a lid, like that, and it'd be wet. And when I started looking at it, the towel dries out pretty quick, and so you'd have to keep adding water to it. So I made this lid, just cut the wafer board, and I had a piece of insulation sitting around, so I cut it in a circle so the insulation will go down inside the pot there, and then the lid acts as the rim. So it sits on there pretty good, and I can set stuff on top of it. Once I get this pot made, I'm going to do some testing to figure out if there's other ways to help cool it down any. But it does work.
Now, what would be the purpose of the sand all the way up? Couldn't
The
you
sand
just put-
holds the water.
Couldn't you just put water in there?
No.
Just by itself?
The water, you'd keep the water levels up, and it wouldn't evaporate as well. The sand creates the barrier in there. It kind of helps as insulation, but it also allows the water to evaporate better.
So how much water do you put in?
You just fill the top until the sand is moist. And so we'll keep topping this off, probably every once a day or twice a day.
You tried to put one of those in the ground a ways?
I haven't because,
Need that.
I mean, it needs to be where it can evaporate. I mean, that's the whole key is the evaporation. So you want it where you can get some good airflow back past there. I mean, if you set up a fan, granted you're going to be using this when there's no electricity, but if you did set up a fan with air blowing on it, it would cool it down even more. One of the guys that I saw that did this had his sitting out in the sun, and I haven't tested it to see if in the sun causing it to evaporate faster will heat it up or make it cool. I'm going to experiment that when I get this one done.
If you don't have any electricity, this is your refrigerator, you won't have a fan that works on that.
Exactly. Exactly. And my
your
premise
wife
on
there.
this, to having one of these, is if the electricity goes out, your fridge is only going to hold the cool for maybe a day at best. Your freezer will hold it a little bit longer if you don't open it, but unless you have a generator, your generator you can probably keep it going for a week and then you're going to run out of gas. But when your fridge goes out, what do? If you're in the wintertime, not a problem. Summertime, you got a problem. Your stuff's going to go bad. So how I see the scenario going is the power goes out through EMP pulse, solar flare, whatever, earthquake. You take that day to get your stuff transitioned out in your fridge, transitioned to this refrigerator to keep it for a couple of days. And it'll extend the life of it a couple of days. Then, as you're using up the stuff that was in your fridge, then you can start taking the stuff from your freezer because it's thawing out and run it through this. It'll extend you a couple of days. You go out and you put the fruit off your trees or whatever, you can put it in, it'll help keep it for a few days. So that's what it is getting it to where you can extend your perishables a few days, because that could be the difference between life and death. So, yes?
Have you experimented with scale at all? I mean, is that kind of as big as you can go?
Oh no, you can go big. This is actually small compared to the ones they use throughout Africa and the Mideast. And that's where this came from. It was an ancient technology that was used thousands of years ago. Disappeared for a long time, and then they recently rediscovered it, and they're starting to use it in other parts of the world now.
So when you want to put this in the coolest part of your house, could it help it to keep it
cooler, or does it matter?
You know, it would probably help keep it as long as you had some airflow around it. I mean, you are adding water to it, and the terracotta does leak out water. That's why it evaporates. That's the other thing. You do not want to use glazed pots. They will not allow it to evaporate. Plus, they're more expensive. So you want to use the unglazed terracotta pots. And these weren't that expensive. These are fairly inexpensive. I think 10, 15 bucks for the big one, 10 bucks for the small one. The sand and then the lid. I mean, it's not that bad to make one of these. So, any other questions on this?
So the cooler your ambient temperature, the better off you're gonna be inside the fridge, right?
Right.
But when you say air movement, are you talking about in the shade outside where the air actually?
That's where I've had this one. I've had it on my back patio. It's covered. So, you know, like this little breeze we have right now, it's going past, so that's evaporating. And we're still 10 degrees cooler, even with that kind of sitting in partial sun. So, and I've had it open a couple of times.
So how much water, once you got it set up, how much water do you usually
Just
add?
keep the sand wet.
I know,
or
but
moist.
what, just give me an idea how much evaporation was occurring.
It depends on how humid it is, or how dry it is, how much I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into it. This past week, it's been a little bit cooler, and so I've added water to it in the morning and then in the afternoon when I go home from work, and it's kept the sand moist.
So you couldn't put it like in your basement,
You could.
because there's no air movement?
There's not the air movement, it's not gonna evaporate as much, and you're not gonna get as much of a cooling on it. And you know, that's something that.
It's already cool.
Yeah, it's already cool in there. I mean, you will get it a little bit cooler, but the more breeze you have, the better it's going.
I was just thinking that for a few dollars, it might be helpful to get one of those refrigerator thermometers that you can just set in there, and that could be useful.
Yeah. I just use this because I have the external sensor there in there, so I
Oh,
can
you
show
have that in the
people
pot.
where it's at. So
Okay.
here's the outdoor temperature here, and here's inside the fridge. So there's proof it works.
Got 9-degree difference there.
Now, different types of foods are gonna require different temperatures to keep them good, right?
Yes.
So, say meat, fresh meat.
They won't last as long in here. You still have to pay attention to the food item that you're putting in there. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is not your electric refrigerator where you can set it to 40 degrees or 35 or whatever. This is to buy you some time to help extend the life of it. You can take one of these on a picnic and put your potato salad in it, and it's going to keep it cool, and it's not going to go bad on you as fast. So that type of deal. So buys you some time. It's not your refrigerator at home, but if you don't have any electricity, this is a lifesaver.
Just have a party and invite everybody.
Anything else? Okay, now the other thing, which I didn't advertise on this, is I was talking to somebody about this refrigerator and telling him how I made it and that, and he goes, oh, by the way, you know you can make a heater out of those. I'm like, a heater? So I researched it, and I came up with this. This is called a candle heater. So, what it is a couple of terracotta pots. There's another pot inside of here. And I can take it apart if you want to. We'll do that in a minute. And then I took a terracotta plate. I had to drill a hole in the bottom of the plate. And then I got a threaded bolt. There's some washers for everywhere that the bolt touches the terracotta. Put a washer in there to help stabilize it. So you can hang it, or you can sit it on something like that, and then you take the candles. Now these are the candles I prefer on this. You can buy these at either 4-hour or 8-hour. These are the 8-hour ones. And you can get them at like IKEA for $3 or $4 for a whole pack of them. so they're pretty inexpensive. So you just have to set these in here on the plate. The more candles you use, the warmer it's going to get. And then you light it. The candle heat would come up and heat up the pots, which would force the heat out. So it's, I mean, if you light a candle in your house, it doesn't really heat it up at all. But going through this pushes out the heat, so it does heat it up. Now, I tested this last weekend. We went camping. I have a camp trailer that has a thermostat in it. Turned it way down. We set this up. I put 5 candles in it, lit it up, and I had to get up in the middle of the night and blow a couple of the candles out because it was a little bit too warm. After the candles burned out, about an hour, hour and a half after the candles burned out and this thing cooled down, then my heat in the trailer kicked off because it finally got me cool in there. So it does work. And I think I'm going to use it more when I go camping in the trailer because it's cheaper than running the propane. So
Does the plate get hot then?
it does get warm. It doesn't get hot as the top parts. And I've gone up and touched it. It hasn't been enough to, like, you know, burn me and leave a mark or anything. It does get quite warm though.
We set it in the stove, on top of the stove top is where we set it in our trailer, so that if it did get too hot, it wouldn't catch the counters on fire and we burned to death.
Yeah, you don't want to set it on.
You put it somewhere under something like that, because it just, like those are supposed to be hot, so.
So, help me understand why the 2 pots inside.
The candles heat up the inside pot, and that helps create more of a surface heat, and so it helps hold the heat.
Spreads it out, draws it.
Like an element.
So, and I've seen models where people have used 3. Yeah. Yeah. You can take and have the materials for your fridge, and then make one of these using these, and be able to go back and forth, because you don't need a heater during the summer, you don't need a fridge during the winter. So you can use the same stuff, you just have to have the materials there. So right now, when you can go out and get the stuff, buy what you need to make the fridge, buy what you need to switch it over to a heater, have all the stuff there, and then when you need it, you can throw it together and be working. I mean,
That's a big heater.
like I said, knowledge is the most important thing. So, any questions on this?
So is there like another nut between the 2
Yes.
pots?
Yes. Between each pot, I have a nut and a washer. Now, on certain critical areas, I have 2 nuts and a washer, and the reason for this is you bind the 2 nuts together, it's not going to come loose. Where you have a single one, that can come loose and you might have to retighten it, especially with the heating and cooling of the pots.
Jeff, tell them where they can get the design.
Face me for just a moment.
What's that?
Tell them where they can get the design, because you don't have a design written up.
Yeah, I can do a design thing if you want.
Just on the internet or something?
Yes, this is on the internet. If you go onto YouTube, and this is where I got it, I went onto YouTube, and you can type in terracotta candle heater. Now, some of the models I looked on there, and some of the things you get feedback for, I've seen people make it and say, this doesn't work. Well, the person that made one, they put 1 candle in there and put it inside of a 10 by 10 room. It's not really going to help much. The more candles you add, the warmer it gets. The thing about this, as opposed to trying to light one of those other heaters in there, you don't get as much carbon monoxide poisoning from the candles as you do a big open flame or one of those other heaters. So this is a little bit safer, with the exception of the open flame. It is an open flame, so you've got to be cautious of that. Make sure you put it someplace where you're going to be safe.
The one I saw had the terracotta pot upside down on the bottom. And so you've got the one on the top, and then instead of the bucket, you got the terracotta pot on the bottom with a tray. And it just seemed to, they had it in their living room with their kids. It's like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. You know, and I think a bigger one in the living room would heat a little better, but you need the candles. So, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different designs on this. So you go to YouTube, terracotta heater. You go to YouTube on the fridge, terracotta refrigerator. The other thing that I saw you can do on this that's not an emergency prep thing is you can make a smoker out of these terracotta pots. You get and so how to make a smoker. You need electricity for that though.
So that's just focus.
Well, you got a generator.
Oh, yeah, with no
So-
gas.
So that's, I mean, for this, for an emergency situation, you have the dual purpose here with the terracotta pots. So, any other questions on this? Okay, the other thing, I was going to have somebody show up and show you solar still. Because we talked about the water, bath water and stuff like that. With a proper solar still, you can use the bath water. So I had a backup plan here. I went and grabbed the black plastic. I went and got a little kiddie pool, it's only a couple of bucks. And this is to just demonstrate, this could be a hole in the ground. Pretend it's a hole in the ground instead of so you don't have to buy anything, you have to dig a hole. But you take some black plastic, grab the black plastic.
You have a great assistant there.
Okay, so push that down like we did the other night. Okay, so tuck the black plastic in.
And we're not talking about brewing, we're talking about water.
Same principle.
Don't give him more ideas.
Idea for what?
Still.
Visible outside.
You know. Okay, so you take and you can either you put the black plastic in, and then what's the reason we need the black plastic? For heat. The black plastic absorbs the heat, which helps in the process. So you want to take your cup, you don't want to use a soft, lightweight cup. You can use a bowl as long as it's heavy, because when you put water in there, it'll start to float and you don't want that. So you can sit it down, you can either put it in the middle, or you can put it to a little bit inside to one side so that you can actually get in there and access it if you need to. So once you got the black plastic down, the next thing is to add the water. And the types of water you can use, I'm not going to fill it all the way, because we're just demonstrating. Now the type of water you can use is bath water, water off the roof of your house, ditch water. You can take and pull the leaves off the trees and put in there. You can put clippings in there. You don't want to use anything that had bug killer on it, fertilizer, stuff like that. So if you do that on your lawn, you don't want to put your grass clippings in there. Chemical stuff evaporates with the water and can poison you. So that's the only thing you want to stay away from. So you can go out and you put salt water in this, have the Great Salt Lake. And if need be, you can do something else. I think you get the idea.
So that's why you were grinning.
So,
Oh, I know now, you're going too fast.
what's that?
You're going too fast. You did one more time.
So, I mean, in reality, if you need to and you need the water, that is a good way to get water. Now, the next thing you do, put the clear plastic over it. And one optional thing that you can do, you don't have to, is add a drinking straw. And what you can do is you take this, set it down inside your cup, making sure it stays there. You want to be able to fold it over and have some sort of strap on there so that nothing comes out while you're making the water, but then you can just drink from it without pulling the plastic off. And then hold it back up.
For each member of the family.
So, go ahead. Grab the string over there, just like we did last time. So you want to just close it up. this is to get the seal. So I'm not going to take, and really worry too much about this. But then you want to take and put the rock away directly above the cup and create the low spot right above the cup. Because what that's going to do, and this you want in the sunlight, direct sunlight. What that's going to do is allow the sun to come through, heat up the water. It's going to evaporate, collect on the upper plastic, drain over right above where the cup's at, the low spot, and it's going to drip into the cup. So that's going to purify any water. Like I said, rainwater, seawater, salt water, whatever. So, and you saw how quick that was.
How much water will it produce in a period of time?
Depends on the sunlight, depends on the temperature. So I can't give you an exact amount.
You're talking drinking water, not washing water, not...
You're talking drinking water. Okay, this is survival. The thing about it is this can be made up camping. You get lost someplace, you have the materials. Plastic's lightweight to carry with you. The most important one is the clear plastic. I mean, you can do this without the black. The black just helps speed it up. So, how many remember the one where I showed how to get the water out of the trees? A couple of you. For those of you that weren't here the last time we did that, you can take a garbage bag, normal garbage bag, go over to the tree, bunch up a bunch of tree branches into that, and tie it off.
With leaves.
With leaves.
With leaves. You want the leaves on it.
Can't get us in the fall. We're in the winter.
So when you do that, a large garbage bag, I did it on my trees, I experimented with it, and I cinched it up, and sitting out there all day, I got about a cup of water. So if you do 10 bags, you got 10 cups of water. So you can do it.
Filter the water first.
And even though the water doesn't look very clear, it's actually tasty enough.
Yeah, you have a little bit of tree taste.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, if you do that, or if you put leaves in here and stuff like that, you want to make sure you're not sensitive, allergy-wise. So you might want to take those leaves, rub them on your wrist, wait about 20-30 minutes, make sure you're not having a reaction. Kind of rub them on your lips, wait about 20 minutes, make sure you don't have a reaction, just to make sure. And then if you do get the water out of it, just sip a little bit, wait a little while, make sure you don't have some kind of allergic reaction. It's just, you should do that with anything that you pick in the wild, just to make sure you don't have some kind of reaction. So, any other questions? Okay. That's all I have for today.
One other question.